I think we were a pretty typical couple. By we, I mean myself, Rob, and my wife Helen. We had two children, Mark and Christine, who were at university, and we were an empty nester. Except for vacations and the prospect that the children might return after university, or whenever they ran out of money. Both were 45 years old. We had known each other for 37 years, had been neighbors and close friends in elementary school, sat next to each other in classes. When regular male and female groups formed in high school, we still sat next to each other in math, despite endless teasing from our peers. We laughed a lot and usually got through the assignments quickly. Almost as equals, we seemed to work better together. One of us would find the answer if the other had difficulty. Classes and subjects came easily. Our teachers were enthusiastic, often leaving us to our own devices. After completing our work, we would discuss our ambitions and plans. Many of them involved traveling and the growing list of places we were to see and adventures we were to have while doing so. The banter stopped on my part when Helen became one of the first girls to mature on our course, and the boys suddenly became jealous. I suffered an endless stream of boys asking about Helen, or asking me to put in a good word. Her sudden development certainly attracted a lot of attention, and as a result we drifted apart, and for the first time in over a year we didn't sit next to each other. We started seeing each other less often in town and at school, though she was still friendly when we did meet. I always felt rather average and knew Helen was in a different league, even attracting the attention of older boys, which she seemed to enjoy. It was in that final year that all the girls seemed to develop. Previously ordinary girls had discovered makeup, hair, fashion, push-up bras, and fitness regimes. In my opinion, they all looked good. Many caught up or surpassed Helen. I was a pretty average guy, average height, average looks. Somehow I carried extra weight in high school, which didn't help my self-esteem, but somehow I got myself in shape. Towards the end of high school, I was surprised when Helen asked me why I never asked her out. I explained that she was out of my league and that it was hard to compete with the number of guys who pursued her. She was always being courted by someone. Her response stumped me a little. "That's the way it should have been done, Rob. I've always liked you. You're funny, a good listener, and a really good conversationalist. We've always gotten along so well, and we've yet to plan adventures." I was shocked, but finally worked up the courage to ask if she really meant it, and if so, would she go out with me. I was even more surprised when she said yes. After that, we never looked back. Over the next few years, I became more confident and eventually happy, thanks in no small part to Helen. She was attractive, positive, and for some inexplicable reason fell in love with me. We married at the age of 21, and soon after we started a family. In the years that followed, we struggled to keep the weight off. I was fortunately helped by a strong, albeit inept, interest in sports. After the children were born, Helen had a harder time, but I didn't complain, especially since most of the weight had gone to her breasts and butt, and in my opinion, she looked more voluptuous. But she didn't think so. She didn't like the way she looked and felt. When the children left for university, everything changed and she started going to the gym and swimming club. She lost a lot of weight, leaving a still shapely but trim 97-71-91 figure, and reached her target weight of 63.5 kilograms. She was 5 5 tall, with long curly red hair that hung down her back and green eyes. She loved classic 1950s movies and favored vintage fitted pencil skirts, flared dresses, and matching jackets from that era. She worked as an elderly care nurse, calm in crisis situations, and gave the impression that she always kept her cool. I thought the best thing about her weight loss was the obvious recovery of her self-confidence. She became more positive and returned to the ebullient, enthusiastic personality I had encountered years before. An added plus was that our sex life had also taken off, and I was beginning to enjoy the empty nest syndrome. One of the downsides of her recent changes was the increased interest from guys. During our marriage, she had always attracted male attention, but now she seemed to be enjoying the attention more than before. In my opinion, she was flirting, but whenever I mentioned it, she brushed it off, saying she was just being friendly. This was taken to the extreme at her Christmas party, where she spent a lot of time dancing with doctors from her hospital. In between dances, she chatted with the same group of 5 or 6 guys. I was happy for her at first, but it got boring quickly, especially when after drinking alcohol, one of them started to let loose. I was just starting to lose my temper when an elegant lady I vaguely recognized took my hand and asked me to dance. As we danced, she introduced herself as Vanessa and explained that she worked with Helen, which explained my memories. She mentioned that she saw me and didn't want me standing alone without company. I wondered if she was meddling in Helen's affairs. After the dance, she led me over to a group of attractive and professional-looking women and introduced me to them. They were all very talkative and friendly, occasionally laying a hand on my shoulder or touching my arm. I didn't realize what was going on. Shortly afterward, a guy came up to me and told me that I was being too friendly with his wife. I replied that I had no idea who his wife was when Vanessa turned to him with a fierce look in her eyes. "You've got some strong nerves, Bill, since you've been hitting on Helen for the past hour. I'd advise you to warn your friends about it, or you won't be the only one sleeping on the couch tonight." The other women in the group watched as a very nervous Bill backed away to his group. A few short conversations later, and the guys around Helen seemed to disperse. Vanessa apologized for this mini-scene but said it needed to be said and asked if I was okay. The truth was that I wasn't. I approached Helen with the question, but she thought it was harmless flirting. When I told her about Vanessa and Bill, she lost some of her bravado. I also suggested that she might need to develop a relationship with another woman. I continued, "To be honest, Helen, I don't blame the guys. It was a real flirtation and it was obvious to everyone that you were enjoying the attention. Have you ever wondered how I feel about that?" I managed a withering apology, but irritated by this response, I insisted that we leave the party early. We sullenly and silently rode home in a cab. Sitting in the kitchen, I broached the subject again. She completely changed tactics, admitting that the party had been exciting. She had enjoyed the attention from the men and felt desirable again, which had greatly improved her self-esteem. She continued, "I'm sorry if this embarrassed you, but now you're going to get the benefit of the doubt. I want you." Helen had never spoken so directly and bluntly, and I wasn't about to turn down the offer. We literally ate each other up and continued until late into the night to make the hottest love in our entire 24 years of marriage. The next day we talked about it again, and I felt a little awkward, but certainly enjoyed the end result. Helen again explained that she thought flirting was harmless to others, but to her it was a turn-on and a bit of a fantasy. She enjoyed the sharp talk and innuendo, and was proud that she could stand up for herself in conversations with the young, brilliant doctors. It was flattering for her to see guys ogling her, and she felt mischievous but safe because I was around. She asked me if I was turned on by her flirting. I didn't know how to answer. I could see how proud she was of looking so attractive and how she liked that other men wanted her. But there was a sense of jealousy attached to it. What I really liked was how sexy and attractive she looked, especially in her flared retro-style skirt that emphasized her femininity. She suggested that if the look turned her on, the next time we went on a date, she would wear the vintage lingerie I liked, and in return she could exercise her imagination and flirt a little if the opportunity presented itself. I hesitated uncertainly until she grabbed my crotch, promising that once again I would be the one to benefit from any arousal. I tensed up, deciding I had to capitalize immediately. I unzipped my fly and pushed her down to my already raging male organ, which she readily accepted. A week later, we gathered for a night out. Helen had showered and applied her makeup, doing her best. False eyelashes, red lipstick, and newly polished nails. Was she getting ready for me or to show off in front of other men? Either way, it was exciting. I chose for her red satin French panties with matching bra and suspender belt, black seam stockings, and high-heeled open-toed shoes. They were covered by a fitted pencil skirt with a thigh-length slit and a cream silk blouse that hinted at the red bra underneath when the two fabrics touched. We sat down on high stools in the corner of the bar. I was content to chat and shamelessly ogle my beautiful wife. I loved imagining what she had under her clothes, and I thought she looked absolutely stunning. We had a few drinks, and I thanked her many times for dressing up like that, reminding her how good she looked. She assured me that she loved doing it for me and that it was really very sexy indeed, especially the stockings. It was then that I noticed a young guy who was quite obviously ogling Helen. She noticed him too and started to look both excited and nervous, slowly turning around to see him looking at her. I saw Helen's eyes meet his and a faint smile appeared on his face. I said quietly to Helen, "He wants you to know that he likes you and the fact that I'm with you doesn't embarrass him." Helen blushed. "Oh my God, he's so handsome and trim, but he's no more than 20. A little while later, I noticed that the slit on Helen's skirt opened up a little as she crossed her legs, exposing her thighs. I wondered how much the guy could see from his angle. "Having fun?" I remarked. "I'm feeling pretty naughty. What if he comes over?" I answered, not quite confidently. We've agreed to do it, but it's only light flirting. We don't go too far. After a while, Helen went to the bathroom. I couldn't help but linger my gaze on her beautiful ass as she walked away from me. I wasn't the only one. The guy's eyes were fixed on her. He looked up and smiled at her as she walked past. I couldn't tell if she was smiling back at him. As she was walking back, the guy said something to her. She stopped and spoke to him. I was so nervous that she talked to him for a bit, and then, to my dismay, sat down next to him. When she sat down, the slit on her skirt opened again, revealing the top of her stockings. My heart beat faster as I realized she had done it on purpose, but I wasn't sure if it was for me or for him. I saw him looking at Helen's leg. It's a strange mixture of emotions to watch another man scrutinize your wife. They seemed to be chatting and laughing easily, and from her reaction it looked like he was paying her a lot of compliments. I watched as she pointed at me with a nod and wondered if she was telling him who I really was or making up a story. She touched his arm and they continued to chat as he moved closer. I was watching my beautiful wife flirting with a young guy, and I had to deal with the excitement. Helen looked at him, perhaps looking for signs of concern, and then winked at me. They continued talking. It must have been about 20 minutes. Then I saw his hand appear behind her back and she changed position slightly. I couldn't tell if his hand slid a little lower, and wondered if he had his hand on her ass. Then I saw him turn his whole body toward her, placing his other hand on her thigh. Helen looked into his eyes with a slightly dreamy expression. Surely she wouldn't go that far, would she? I saw the answer to my question when he leaned in and kissed her lips gently. It lasted seconds, but seemed like hours. My heart was beating so fast. My wife kissing someone else right in front of me and me just watching. I stood up and with an effort of will, I forced my legs to move. Helen was looking at me with a flushed face and a nervous look on her face. Seeing my unease, she stood up quickly, said a hasty goodbye, intercepted me and dragged me out of the bar. Once outside, Helen asked if I was all right. I mumbled something evasive in response. Her excitement was obvious. She started babbling something. His name was Matt. He was very calm and a very nice guy. She told him who I was and what we were doing. This led to him offering to touch her and kiss her. She continued, "Being in another man's arms while you're watching it was so amazing. I was nervous and horny. I admitted to him that I was really horny, but I needed to get back to you." What caught my attention was the use of the word need rather than want. When we got home, we were literally tearing each other's clothes off. My mind was going crazy with desire, but even more I wanted to claim her as my own. There were moments of doubt if she was thinking about Matt and why she was so horny. We ended up making love twice and again in the morning. It had been years since we'd been able to do that. The next day, we talked it over again. I admitted that I enjoyed the attire and the long-distance flirting, but the talking and kissing seemed uncomfortable. Helen focused on the fact that in bed afterward was mind-blowing and that she would like to do it again someday. I was conflicted. The kiss was both terrifying and arousing. I had to admit that I liked it when my wife was desirable and much sexier than she had ever been during our relationship. I asked if she had been thinking about me or Matt the previous night. She admitted that thoughts of both of us had flashed through her mind, and it had increased her desire. The idea that she could easily attract young, handsome guys and be so direct and frank in conversation with them was a revelation to her. She assured me that she loved me more than ever, and my presence added to her excitement and intensity. I had my doubts and fears about where this might lead, but our bedtime became more frequent and intense. Helen reminded me that I had always gently encouraged her to be more adventurous in bed and to try new things. She was right. Marriage to a sexually confident woman was bringing a whole new dimension to our relationship. Nevertheless, I said we needed to be careful in our relationship and make sure we were both good with anything we might try. Helen agreed, and it took another 2 months before she asked to try again. Once again, Helen prepared herself in a way that I had enjoyed the last time I had picked out her outfit. This time the mood was more tense. Her preparation was very erotic, especially my help in securing the stockings to the belt clasps. It was all covered by a tight-fitting strapless dress that emphasized her slender figure, and her lush breasts were supported and accentuated by the reinforced underwear. I was surprised when Helen completed her outfit with a dainty gold ankle bracelet, but didn't pay much attention to it. We headed to another bar and sat in a booth at a back table. Once again, I was glad to be in the company of such a beautiful woman who happened to be my wife. Helen was getting a lot more attention this time, and I noticed a couple of guys staring at her bracelet. I excused myself to the restroom and then for another round of drinks, and when I returned, there was a guy sitting next to her chatting away. He was about 5'10", good-looking, probably in his early 30s, and looked very confident. When I approached, he introduced himself as Liam and bluntly asked if I minded if he chatted to my wife. I hesitated, seeing the hope in Helen's eyes, and nodded in agreement. The three of us chatted, with Liam paying more attention to Helen. Liam asked about her anklet on her leg. Helen shrugged guiltily and said she just thought it looked cute. Liam nodded and they glanced at each other. Helen admitted that she'd dressed to get attention and flirt a little. Further discussion brought out our previous experiences, but we hadn't decided how far to take it. To my surprise, Liam said he'd done similar things in the past, meeting couples on dating apps, and suggested some tests to see if it was a good fit for us. He would take a few actions while we chatted and relaxed, and we would each rate the actions to see if we liked them. I was both curious and nervous, so we agreed that we could stop at any point. Of course, Liam confirmed encouragingly. Great, so let's try this first. With these words, he gently took my wife's hand in his, and after a few seconds commented that he really liked the touch of her soft skin and gave her 7 points. Helen readily agreed, saying that it was also 7 points for her. I again had mixed emotions and shrugged my shoulders, but had to admit that it was arousing and rated it 6 points. Liam continued, "See, that wasn't so hard and we're all still friends." He continued talking without letting go of Helen's hand. After about 10 minutes, Liam suggested a second test. He let go of Helen's hand and put his hand on her knee. Helen flinched a little, but then said that it was 8 points. Liam smiled, saying that he liked the feel of the nylon and it was a 9 point for him. I mumbled that it was fine and it was a 7 point. Liam continued, "What if I try this one?" I saw his hand go up to Helen's thigh and squeeze it gently. She looked very turned on. "You have fantastic legs and I just felt a hint of the top of your stockings. Women in stockings are so erotic. It's one of my favorite things, Tan." Helen seemed to melt slightly, sighing. That's a 9 for me." I stuttered. "I'm not sure how comfortable I am with that 3. Liam looked at me and moved his hand back to Helen's knee. "Why don't we leave it for a while and see if you get more comfortable?" He continued to chat casually, asking about both of us and seeming genuinely interested in our past and what had brought us to this point. After a while, I saw him stroking Helen's thigh, then leaned over and whispered something in her ear. Laughing at his comment, she put her hand on his thigh. They leaned forward casually to talk to me, blocking my view under the table. After a few minutes, they leaned back, her hand still resting on his thigh. "Okay, it's time for the critical test," Liam announced. "That will determine what happens tonight. Now I'm going to kiss your wife." Before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a tender kiss like the other night. After a few seconds of kissing her lips, I saw her mouth open and his tongue penetrated it. It turned into a long, sensual kiss. When the kiss finally broke, they looked at each other and simultaneously said, 10. They looked at me, waiting for an answer to the implied question, 0, and we should go. I'm not sure if I shouted it out or whispered it. I was in a complete daze. Helen looked embarrassed, but Liam didn't seem the least bit upset and spoke again. "Just relax, Rob. We're all still friends. It was exciting, but you're not ready for it, and that's fine. Don't get mad about it. We're just testing our boundaries. Why don't you guys stay here and have another drink? I'm going to go." With those words, he looked at Helen, took her hand and kissed it. "That was an absolute delight, Helen. It was a pleasure to meet you." He turned to me and held out his hand. "It was nice to meet you, Rob. You really are a lucky guy and your wife is just beautiful. I think you both should be applauded for spicing things up and wish you all the best. Here's my number if you ever want to get in touch."